Hello and welcome to CyberOne Certification and Training. If you're here as part of the certification program, there is no exercise at the end of this video. This segment is just for informational purposes. If you're here for training or support, but you're interested in learning how to become certified as a CyberOne expert, then just contact your account manager or shoot us an email at support@cb1security.com. Okay, so let's get started. Today we're in the compliance management training section, and we're going to be just giving you an overview of the compliance management platform. We'll show you some of the automation capabilities and the content libraries that are available to you to make your compliance work as efficient as possible. Let's start by looking at our workflow diagram. This shows you the multiple approaches that you can take to compliance on the CyberOne platform. First option is to start with targets. These are assets of any kind that require compliance. So that could be an application, a server, a project, a business unit, all the different elements of your business that you want to test for compliance. These can be uploaded into the targets segment of CyberOne. And from there, you can go to control activities and begin to develop your testing protocols. Create your evidence checklist, so the list of evidence that you're going to verify for compliance, and then establish your control owner and create document requests in our system that will go out to the control owner to upload evidence. The document request process can be fully automated. We can do this in one of two ways. If the data that you're looking for, the evidence that you're looking for, is contained in one of your systems, CyberOne can integrate with that system and do an automatic data pull. The other way you can do this is set the cadence of the document requests. So if you need to collect that evidence on a weekly, monthly, annual, ongoing as needed basis, you can establish that cadence in your document request. And then once you send out the first document request to the control owner, the system will automate that protocol from there out, and you will never have to set that request again. It will just automatically go out a few days before the required period. So once you've got your evidence sent back in, then we have the actual verification processes. You can do self-assessment on CyberOne. That's where you just do an ad hoc, where the compliance manager generally just verifies that the evidence that's been submitted is correct. And then we can do a control or audit test. Some people call this control test. Some people call it audit. In CyberOne, it's called control test. And that's a more formal verification process where the evidence is reviewed and then sent to a team leader in preparation for audit. So you can review all of the evidence that you're collecting to make sure that you have audit readiness before you bring in the auditor. Again, if those controls pass, then you're moving towards audit. But if they fail, you can create findings at any time and begin the risk mitigation process and then come back around to testing. Another option then, if you're approaching compliance from a governance perspective, is we can overlap with our policy module, and you can upload all of your policies into CyberOne, and we'll show you that facility as we go into the training. And then we can create internal controls that will connect to your obligations, your requirements through our control library, and back into your policies. And then from there, you can go into control activities and begin that process again. So the great thing about this system, of course, as well, is you can create a single internal control that may map to multiple control requirements, maybe from ISO and NIST CSF and other requirements for one internal control that also go into your policy. So that you can look at multiple requirements and test for multiple requirements at the same time. You can also attach a risk register to internal controls. That enables you to help look for policy gaps and different risks as you go into the compliance system. Okay, so that's the basic protocol from the CyberOne platform. Let's get into the platform now and take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so here we are on the CyberOne platform, and we're actually going to start in the policy management module today. and just show you the governance perspective of CyberOne. So here, as you can see, we have a policy tab where you can upload your policies, and these are what the policies look like in CyberOne. So you can write them directly into CyberOne, you can upload them into the system. And if you're working from old policy documents, many companies still keep their policy documents in a Word document or a PDF. You can archive those documents here in our system. And the great thing about this is if we just click into this document and go into the file, you can keep multiple versions here. This one only has one version, but we will keep all versions for you and you can always access them. So you can see when a policy has been updated and also make sure you've got the latest policy. Then we also have our obligations. So again, when we begin our contract with a client, what we'll do is we'll talk to them about the requirements that they need for compliance, and we'll upload those into our system. You see just a snapshot here. We have AICPA SOC 2, GDPR, CMMC, the new government requirement. And we have over 80 different regulations and requirements in our obligations library that we can access for you. And these include national and global privacy and security controls. So just ask us for what you need and we'll get it for you. Then subsequently in our control library, all of these obligations are then broken down into their control sets. And of course, this is what we're going to use to map to internal controls and begin our compliance from the governance perspective. So if you're not approaching it from the governance perspective though, what you can do is if we go into the compliance management module, you may prefer to start from the targets tab. And if you're just looking at a target that you want to do compliance on, you can list your targets here. And if I just open up one of these, you'll see that everything is interconnected again as well. So if I look at this target, you'll see we've got it as it's a business unit. We know who the head of this business unit is in this case. And we see that this business unit actually has 2 control activities that it's looking at. Let's go into one of those so we can jump straight into the control activities tab, which is here, by going to here and the specific control activity that reports to this target. So if I click on this, now you see I'm in the control activities tab. And we have the control that we're going to be testing. We're looking at the access control policy. We want to make sure the business unit is adhering to the policy. And you can see also that this is, in this case, connected back to an internal control. So if I just go to that internal control, the great thing about CyberOne then is this internal control then is mapped to our risk category for access control. So now we can complete our risk register if we're doing risk management here. And it's also in our access control policy. If I just push on that, you'll see here it's connected to our policy. And so everything is interrelated in CyberOne. And then finally, of course, going back to that obligation set, you see here all of the different obligations that we have connected to this specific internal control. So these are all the requirements that we're going to satisfy when we do compliance. Okay, so let's go back to that control activity and move forward. So once we've established our test plan, then what we want to do obviously is check for the evidence. So we have an evidence section here where we can add the evidence. That evidence comes from our checklist library. And again, what we can do is create all these records or bulk upload them as from a CSV file so that you have all of these records here ready to go. And of course, if you have an evidence checklist library that has all of your evidence archived, the great thing about that is once you've asked the control owner for this piece of evidence once, you can use that to test for multiple control activities, compliance activities, just by selecting it from the evidence library itself. So you see here our access control policy has already been submitted. So if I need to use this for other control activities, control tests, I don't need to send another email out to the evidence owner, the person who owns this policy. I can simply connect it to my control activity in the system, and then I can begin my testing process. So let's show you how that works. So here you see evidence checklist item, and there is the control activity that we were just working in. And I'm going to go back to that. And so actually, as this document has been submitted, we are actually ready for testing. But before we get to that stage, let's just show you how we send out the document requests. So if we do want to send a document request out, if this evidence hadn't been uploaded, what we can do is we can just go into edit mode in the evidence checklist record. Here we have the option to add the control owner, the person who is going to provide the evidence. As you can see, we can add the cadence, create the cadence for how often this is going to be collected. We can select manual or automated approach. In this case, manual means we are going to send an email out to the control owner to ask them to upload the evidence, whereas automated would be an automated pull from a system via integration. We then establish the evidence period. Of course, that has to be in the past. So let's just put that in the past. And then we can click save. And then when we're ready to go, we can just do add new document request with automation. And that'll send out that email to the control owner, letting them know that they upload the evidence. So you don't have to send an email yourself personally. Our system will do that. And again, once you've done this once, it will automate it. So once the control owner responds to that, if we go back to our control activity, again, you can start to monitor everything from your control activity. Here we see the document request that's been attached automatically when we send that out. And we see now that that document has been submitted. So the first thing we can do is we can actually go in and we can look at the evidence itself. In this case, it's an external link that's been provided to us. So I can just click on that link. And here it is, our policy. Once I've done that, that's effectively my eyeball or ad hoc verification. We call that a self-assessment test. I can go back to my control activity and I can actually log that as a self-assessment test. If I just click on this, that'll take us to the self-assessment test. Here you can see I have the option to add in the test plan description, list myself as the tester, put the kind of test it is, and then whether it's passed or failed. Any test result documentation I want to add to that, then I just click save. Subsequently, we can again see we can go back to the control activity by just clicking here. And then if we want to do a more formal test, as we've done here, we go to control test. Very similar process where we add the information, then just click save. And then when we're ready now, this time we submit for approval. And as you can see, I submitted this for approval earlier, and that'll send an email to the reviewer, who is my manager, Jordan. And now you see that Jordan rejected this. And so because of that, Jordan rejected this piece of evidence. And so then I went to my finding record section here, and I created a finding. So now as I create that finding, I can then send another email notification to my control owner, Timmy. And what Timmy's going to get is a request to mitigate and go into issue management. So then the issue management can also be monitored on here. In the finding response section, you'll see if Timmy chooses to mitigate the risk or go into an exception request, and you continue the workflow there until you are ready for compliance. So that is the full workflow overview for compliance management. Again, you can approach this from that governance perspective. You can go in through the targets and then make sure everything's linked up later on. But this gives you a great way to automate a lot of that process and make sure that everything is interrelated. So you really get that assurance that when you've finished collecting all of your evidence, you can review and know that you're ready for audit before you bring in those auditors. Okay, so thank you again. And that concludes our training for today.